There it is.
Live.
Hi.
Live happened.
We are live. Well, maybe not as people are watching this, but hello. I'm Georgie Cohen. I am one half of Meet Content.
I'm Rick Allen. I'm the other half of Meet Content.
I'm Amanda Costello. I'm not associated with Meet Content, but I'm happy to be here.
You are 0.00% of Meet Content.
None.
You're an honorary member of Meet Content.
Right. A former guest blogger on Meet Content.
Yes.
A friend and compatriot.
Friend of Meet Content.
Yes. It's really fun. And we are here to have a little conversation with Amanda. One, because she's awesome.
Thanks.
And it just seems like a really good way to spend some time. But also because she is one of the esteemed keynotes for this fall's Confab Higher Ed conference taking place in November in beautiful New Orleans. So we are super, super, super duper excited that we are going to get to see Amanda take the stage down in the Bayou. She's been working on her southern accent, so we're really excited to see it.
I have not. If anything else, my Minnesotan accent will only intensify as a panic reaction.
You'll just get up there and be like, start stammering and oh geez,
Geez, guys, I barely even wrote anything, so let's just go out and it'll be fine.
Wait, that's your southern accent?
That's my Minnesotan accent.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense.
Like, I can't southern accent. I cannot do that. I won't try. It would be so sad.
I think that was actually one of the stipulations. I don't know if you read all the paperwork.
My contract, no!
Anyway, so we wanted just to take this opportunity to just chat a little bit, and there might be cats that happen. Sometimes cats happen. We might see a cat guest star. That is always fun. But before we sort of start talking, Amanda, how are you doing? What's going on? How are you looking forward to this fall to Confab Higher Ed?
I am super excited for this fall. I also consider myself a friend of Confab, and Confab has been a huge part of my life, both personally and professionally, because it was at the very first Confab Central in 2000, date here, 5-ish years ago, that I wound up sitting at a higher ed table with Georgie, and we got to know each other there. And that was kind of my first connection to other people in higher ed that were doing these things. I think it was maybe 2011, I think. But it was wonderful and amazing, and it was kind of it was this opening up my mind. And our higher ed table was also huge. The next day, the lunch table topic for higher ed, we had to add a second table.
And eventually they added a whole conference. So,
And then they added a whole conference. So I've seen content strategy take off at other higher ed conferences that aren't necessarily focused on content strategy, which has been super awesome and a great way to pull more people in and get people to know about the goodness of content strategy. But having a conference that's just higher ed content strategy is just full-on soaking in amazing goodness for 3 days, and it could not be better. It's wonderful.
And there's cake. Pretty good.
All the cake.
And lots of snacks. I enjoy the intersession snacks too. Very good.
You are not left hungry at a Confab conference. I think if you work in higher ed and you can't make a dinner out of conference snacks, you shouldn't even be working in higher ed. You got to know how to stretch those heavy appetizers. You can make a dinner out of that.
It's finding where all the post-meeting free food is and making meals out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So really on your game. All this stuff about building relationships and stuff, it's not about doing work more efficiently. It's really about finding out when are the big meetings that are going to have really good catering, and then knowing when they end, and then being able to hang out afterwards and get a sandwich. That's really what it's all about.
I have totally stocked well-catered events on campus because there are leftovers. And I'm proud to say that as an employee of a large public research university, is that I know how to find food.
Efficiency, it's about using all the resources at your disposal, not letting anything go to waste. I mean,
really, it's because I'm good at my job. That's how I find these sandwiches.
That's it, folks. Thanks for joining us.
Okay. Have a good life. Find your own sandwich. Yeah.
So yeah, you are at the University of Minnesota.
Yep.
And you're currently working at the college level, and previously you worked at the department level, but you have not worked at the university-wide level. Is that right?
I have not worked at the institution university level. Nope.
So tell me a little bit about sort of like where you've been and where you're at, and sort of how those interactions work. 'Cause I know you work closely with the departments in your college, and you actually work at some level with the broader university. So as a content strategist sitting at the college level, tell me about how that works.
Well, the University of Minnesota is kind of famously / notoriously decentralized and siloed. There was a joke at the first Confab Higher Ed where a colleague of mine was sitting in a session waiting for it to start, and two women in front of him were talking about how their university was so decentralized and nobody knew what other people were doing, and it was so awful. And my colleague taps him on the shoulder and said, you know, I would put my university up against yours any day. They all worked for the U of M. They all worked for Minnesota. And in fact, these women worked 2 buildings away from my coworker, but they'd never met and they'd never talked. They had to go a time zone and many, many states away to even meet each other. So because we're so decentralized, the college is kind of like, it's a lot of people doing their own thing because we're really big and it's a really odd culture. But I really appreciate it because I feel like it lets us have a little more unique control over what we do with our college's content and what we do with our strategy. We don't have to run everything through university relations. Also, there is no centralized like web content strategy for the university. It's just a whole bunch of people trying to do best practices, seeing other people that do internet for job and talking to them. So there's a lot of kind of grassroots movement between. The other weird thing is that content strategy sits at this weird intersection of IT and communications. And that has given our long-suffering central HR department some big headaches. We tried to do a job reclassification, or I mean, they did. They looked at all of the job classes at the U and redid them a few years ago. And they got to my job, and they said, okay, well, right now you have a communications class. So fill out this thing about what you do, but I had this huge chunk of it that wasn't covered by communications because of all the work I do with the web and what I need to understand in terms of web best practices and web standards, and I do hand code a lot of stuff, and I need to know how things are going to interact on a technical side. And they said, wow, that's a large part of your job. How about you fill out the IT job family survey instead, because that might be a better fit. But the IT job family didn't have anything about all the communications work that I do. So I ultimately wound up classed as communications, but that kind of, there's still not a really good job class for this kind of web strategy work at the U. It just flummoxed our HR department. So it's living on all these kind of weird different bridges. What I do at the college level, we are really unique in that we have content strategists that are in each one of our 8 departments. Each department has a content strategist housed inside it. They are an employee of that department, and they handle that department's needs and content and strategy, and then depending on how involved with things that department wants to be. At the college level then, instead of making a content strategy that they all follow, we listen to all of our departments and figure out what a good supportive strategy can be that unites them. We have very different departments that do very, very different things, but they're all academic departments. They all have students, they all have faculty. The students need to graduate, the faculty need to do research. So we at the college level try to find the commonalities and support the departments through that. Then we also base the college's content strategy off of what the departments are doing. So instead of top down, it's more bottom up, and that works well.
It seems like a unique situation where each of those departments within the college actually have a content strategist. What advice would you have for someone that was in a situation that didn't have other peers like that within the same college that they could team up with?
Yeah.
How could they kind of make content strategy work?
Our situation was very unique in that it took, I think, about 8 or 9 years for that whole situation to be fully staffed, as it were. It came out of a merger where a number of colleges were coming together, and we started off with 2 departments that had that. If someone finds themselves either in a departmental situation or a college situation where you're kind of that solo person, I would say reach out to see who else is there. Like, if you go poking around your institution's website and find a page or a department site or a college that looks like someone has thought about the user for more than like 2 seconds, contact their web team and say, hey, let's share stuff. As competitive as our colleges inside the university can be, and as competitive as universities are with each other, overall, I find that the people that work in higher ed are interested in doing good things and learning from each other. Like, we want to be able to do better. So I regularly meet with people from other colleges, and I met with folks at University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is probably it's definitely our biggest sports rival, but is a really big competitor for us as well in terms of freshman enrollment. We're both Big Ten schools in the upper Midwest. But I did a workshop with them and talked about what we do. And at the workshop, someone said, I can't believe the folks at Minnesota would let you come here and tell us all of this stuff you do. And I said, that's really sad. Like, why wouldn't we? Like, this is just us doing better for higher ed. Like, if my boss said you can't, like, I get not telling, there's recruitment strategies and there's some stuff that we do want to keep secret, but I don't work in admissions. I'm just trying to help students and anyone use our website better. And I know folks at other schools are doing that too. So that's why I love talking to other schools, finding other people, and just saying, hey, what are you doing? Let's just share. And it makes it better for everybody.
So I'm thinking about your keynote talk that's coming up at Confab Higher Ed. The topic is about silos. And I think, like, I've seen so many talks at so many conferences where you have, like, the best available Flickr Creative Commons image of a silo, and sort of like this, like, referring, like, break down the silo busting, and everyone's like, yeah, it's amazing, that's what we need to do. But it's a hard thing to think about and to do in practice, and maybe not even something that's truly 100% possible. And I know that you're going to be touching on this, so I'm just curious about sort of your thoughts and what you're thinking and your experience has been, because obviously you have an open mindset. Just in hearing you talk right now, I mean, you want to connect and share and educate, and that's awesome, and that is what's so great about higher ed. But if you're curious about sort of your thoughts on the silos in higher ed and how we manage and work within them, and can they be busted?
I think silo busting in higher ed, I think higher ed is because of the nature of it, is a naturally siloed industry or kind of way of thinking. Higher ed has also been around for like hundreds and hundreds of years and has had plenty of time to entrench itself in its silos. If you think about, modern business practices in terms of industrialization and capitalism and stuff, that's all been relatively, like, in the scope of things, more recent, and higher ed has been around for a lot longer in terms of civilization and learning. So those silos just not only have formed a long time ago, but get entrenched in this kind of, this is how we do things way. Higher ed also moves extremely slowly, which people from outside higher ed find very frustrating. When I tell people, I'm just like, oh, we did this big project, we redid our whole research section of our site, we got it done in a year, and agency people will be like, what is wrong with you? And higher ed people will be like, truckin', way to go, a year for buy-in, and no one wanted you fired? Like, yeah, go fast. So things move slowly, and it's had a long time to slowly get more and more entrenched. It's tough when I see people calling for silo busting, because the nature of organizational silos means the person that can bust them is largely at the top. And while we have a lot of college and university leadership that comes to Confab Higher Ed, it feels like more of the people that are there are kind of maybe in the middle of a silo. They're somewhere inside of it. And it's hard for them to bust a silo because you've got someone at the top kind of keeping the lid on. So in my talk, which still exists in a really insane Evernote document that I wish I could show everybody because it has all of my weird notes in it, like joke here, don't make it bad, or funny picture, find this. It's a lot about how to essentially take the organizational structure that you have, which is silos, and make it work. One of the other things I'm a really big fan of is architecture. I'm a big historical architecture nerd, and have been since I was a little kid. And there's a book by Stuart Brand. He also did the Whole Earth Catalog, and it's called How Buildings Learn. And it's about essentially historical building use and change as society and people's demands on the buildings change, or as people think of new things. And this can be very simple, like a house growing a second story, or having a garage added to it, not just put in the backyard, but actually having a garage built on part of it. And part of that is also, if you think about literal grain silos, which I, in the Midwest, see all the time. There are at least 3 within a couple blocks of my house. There are silos around here that aren't used anymore because this is not where we keep silage. And people have repurposed those things. There is a condominium block by one of the big lakes in Minneapolis that most people don't know until you go inside it, but the whole spine of this condo block is old silos. It's an old grain elevator. And then they're just built around it. There is an old silo in, northern Iowa that every winter a guy runs a bunch of water piping up, turns them on, freezes the outside of the silo, and people can go ice climbing. Because I don't know if you've been to northern Iowa, but there's not a lot of places to like go ice climbing. It's pretty flat.
Right.
So people all over the country are doing really interesting things with these kind of remnants that we don't need anymore, but maybe we don't need to tear down. So that's kind of the way that I started to look at it, both organizational silos, and then I was driving to work and realized that I see silos all over the place. Like I'm surrounded by them, literal ones, and looked at how we're using those, and even in the city, and then in Minnesota. So that'll come into it too. And there will be a really great Creative Commons picture of a silo, but it will be like really friendly and beautiful, and we'll all fall in love with it.
For like people that are, whether they're practitioners or not, the people you're trying to convince to get into the collaborative game here, like how do you get them to buy into the need for collaboration for content strategy when, like, yesterday that's not how they did it?
Yeah. A lot of it, so I've done talks in the past about how I've worked with faculty and how I've then convinced my bosses and my grand bosses to kind of buy in on content strategy. One of the big things I do is I will tend to scare people a little bit by saying, here's your new reality, but then back off from that by saying, don't worry, I'm here. You immediately freak them out with the need of just like, this is what people are expecting. You know, print out the Ruffalo Noel Levitz thing and say, website, #1 thing that prospective students are looking at for undergrad and grad. Like, here is data that is real and is backed up, and fight me. Like, let's go. Like, we can't argue with this. But instead of setting it up of like, I'm the web person and you're the faculty, or you're the director, or you're my admin, and now we have to fight on this, I try to say, here's a reality. And the good news is we're on the same side of the table. Like, this is not us fighting each other. This is, you've got someone else on your team. Now you've got someone else that can help you with this stuff. Because faculty, like, I can't even with faculty because their jobs are so wild and crazy. At one point last year, I was talking to my boss and I said, I don't understand how tenure works. Like, I'm not ever going to be academic faculty. I'm never going to go through this process, but it's something that is consuming the brains of like a quarter of the people that I work with in some way or another. And my boss kind of said, well, why don't you ask the dean? And I said, I will. So I emailed our dean, who's a very chill person, and said, I don't understand how this works. It's affecting a huge amount of people that we work with. Can you come to one of our web team meetings and explain to all of our strategists how our tenure process works? And she did. She spent 2 hours with us. She brought all of this huge folder of all of her own tenure review documents and passed around stuff. She brought printouts of U of M policy. She went through like specific examples. She spent all this time with us. And at the end, we were all terrified because it sounds insane. But it also gave us a lot more empathy for this other group that we work with. And I'm not reviewed 3 times a year by different groups of my peers who all give me different feedback. And then the next year I have to report back in. Like, the amount of crazy pressure on tenure, like going through the tenure review process, it just blew our minds. Like, we knew it was intense, but we didn't know it was this intense. So having that kind of perspective, instead of coming at people to collaborate with and say, you know, here's now what I need from you, it's here's this new reality, but don't worry, I'm on your team. Like, you don't need to stress out. I'm here to help you. But like the web, we got this. We can do this together.
Whenever I'm thinking about those examples of content strategists dealing with faculty, I always think about you, Amanda, because you're always talking about that. I think of you as a very skilled mediator working with faculty and administration. And like, in my experience working in higher ed, right, yeah, it's the faculty member thinking, well, I'm the subject matter expert. Mm-hmm. You're working on the web. You don't understand the content. Mm-hmm. And then there's the person on the web saying, you don't understand the medium. You don't understand how this needs to work on the web. I mean, how do you get everybody, not just faculty, but like people working on the web too, to think differently, like about the way that they work? Yeah,
it's tough because getting content ready for the web, especially academic content. Like, I've worked on pages before where someone's like, hey, we really want our web page updated. We don't really think students understand it. And I said, oh, and I made a joke in a meeting. I'm just like, this looks like a grant application. And they said, it's our grant application. I'm like, oh, no. Because that's what they had. Like, that's what described their program. So they needed a website to talk about their program, and they wrote a grant, and that takes forever. So they already did that work. They just put it up. So with that, it's a lot of just, so I hate jargon overload, but I will do it in front of faculty to overwhelm them. To say, this is the world that I'm in, and here is stuff that I know. And I just say, stop me when I say a word that you don't know. Stop me when I roll through a term, because I can talk about this all day. I am actually so I work on our college web team is 4 people, and all 4 of us have different strengths in dealing with different projects or different types of things. So in our team meetings, we'll often go through our projects, and sometimes we'll hand a project off to somebody else, where I can say, I'm stuck on this. I can't. I'm not a good fit for this project. This isn't working for me, and I'll hand it off to someone else. But usually, because I have kind of what my boss calls a nuclear level of enthusiasm, I am the last person that gets brought in. Like, if I wind up on your project, it's because they need my grandboss calls it. He was in a meeting with me once, and he called it releasing the Kraken. Like, when I show up to be the PM, you are getting full force enthusiasm. And my boss had brought me in on this meeting of like, this, you know, I think they need you. They need you to sort through this and break through things and clarify things, and I'm just not getting through to them. So we have this meeting, and I am full force, all about it. We're going to make this. This is going to be great. And at one point, the faculty member, my boss told me after, looked over at him and kind of like, is this? And he's like, no, you can't go back now. Nope, you've got Amanda. So while I do work with faculty, I found out through my team, I'm not always the best person to work with a certain faculty member. My skill set is usually a lot of enthusiasm. So I get the excitable faculty, or sometimes I will get the very, very difficult faculty. Because what's helped in my meetings with them is I try to leave as much ego as I can at the door, because faculty members often bring enough in the room for many people. And I try to learn from them. Whether they teach or not, they had at some point, and they have a responsibility for teaching. And they live in a world where a lot of people don't know or don't understand or don't care about what they do every day. Like, the grocery store clerk is not going to say, hey, you did all that research on, how, using exergaming techniques like really helps with people who can't access traditional gym facilities. Like, they're just bagging your groceries, they don't care. So asking them about their work and saying, I am really interested in what you do, and then saying, can you explain that more for me? Can you explain that more for me? That gets them in the mindset of having to break down their content, of these are the questions the user might have. But it's not the user at that point, it's just me sitting there wanting to learn. And that starts to then build trust, and I can then channel that into saying, these are also questions your users might have, or how can I learn more about that? And that puts them into a mindset of like, oh, so this is how, like, they've just, there in 5 minutes, have done a content breakdown of, we started very, very complex, and now we've simplified things and clarified them and shortened them, and this is what it's going to be like.
I think this is really fascinating to hear you talk about your approach, because you really, like, in hearing the words that you're using, like, if I, like, took a transcript of what you just said and, like, ran it against, like, a database, like a glossary of content strategy, like, there wouldn't be a lot of overlap, because you're not talking about, like, audits and stakeholder. You're not using those words. You're talking about being perceptive and attentive to people, and knowing where they're at, and knowing, like, it's like, Rick said mediator. I was thinking like DJ, like, like, oh, this is the song for this mood. Like, yeah, okay, we're gonna slow jam now. Like it's really about, like, it's just knowing how to approach people and what they need and what's called for, and when to give tough love and when to give the support and when to do all the things. And I think that, I still think that people, like, get a little bit hung up with content strategy, because it's in the sense that, like, it's all these books, and there's all these terms, all these, like, deliverables and spreadsheets and all that stuff. But, like, and hearing you talk about it, it's like, it's really, it's about this, like, it's just like a personal, emotional side almost, which is knowing, like, the interpersonal relationships and how to manage them. Was there, like, as you've sort of gone through your career and sort of come, obviously I'm talking about, like, this is what you do, and you've had success in doing it. Like, I feel like it took me a little bit to realize that it was more about, like, the people than, like, the work, like the documents. Like, what is a moment when you sort of realize that, like, this work is not just about, like, words and pixels and sort of, like, documents, but it was really about, like, dealing with people and where they're at and making connections at that level?
I think that's one of the things that, weirdly, I started off early. So I used to be an English teacher in Japan. And when I was there, I was responsible for our exchange students. It was 2 high school students each year. I was there for 2 years, so I had 4 students over my time there, and they were from Australia. And I collaborated with their teachers back in Oz to say, they're still on track, they're still learning stuff. But I also kind of had to be this, like, guidance counselor, friend, teacher person of, they would have a tough time, adjusting to something that was so weird and frustrating. And I also helped Japanese students who had been on the other side of the exchange. They're like, I want to see America, or I want to study abroad again, or I'm interested in a foreign college, or I want to keep my English up, so let's have conversation. And I helped them kind of figure out, here's some paths that you could do. So before I got into working with the web, I had planned on going to graduate school in essentially international education programs, where you put together programs to encourage people to study abroad or to work abroad and come back, or to encourage people to come here to learn and then go back to their home countries and share knowledge, because it had been so influential for me in Japan. So one of the classes, I wound up not going to grad school because I got my grad school letter of acceptance, I think about 2 weeks after I heard Christina Halverson speak at a conference in 2010 about content strategy, and my brain blew apart. And then grad school was like, hey, come to grad school. And I'm like, oh, no, none of this, no, internet forever. But because of that, one of the classes I'd taken on our tuition benefit program at the university was an introduction to counseling procedures. And it was a semester long, and essentially ran you through the practices of counseling and running a counseling session. And at the end, the final project of this was you had all these waivers from the psychology department and our counseling program, and you got a stranger and you ran a half-hour counseling session with them. And they knew you were a student, so you tried not to get into anything too heavy, but things might come up, and you had to videotape it, and the professor graded everything. She graded how you took notes, if you did, how you were sitting, your body language, your posture, how you noticed and reacted to their posture. So even though I only took one class on that, it was incredibly powerful, and the professor is very, very good. And I think that has actually been a really helpful thing in dealing with this, because when I'm dealing with people's content, because it's faculty, and especially after I learned about the insane tenure process, they've been doing this for decades. And this is something that is so central to their life in a way that so many other kinds of work isn't, and so many other kind of institutions are not. Many people have areas of expertise that they're very, very passionate about, but I think they're very rarely evaluated and work with it in the way that higher ed faculty do. And our faculty, we're also at a R1, a Research 1 institution, so there's also a really big expectation for research. So they're also always having to push and look at new ideas. So I've wound up leaning on that counseling stuff before I came to content strategy. That was some of the training that I had. So that's what comes out in a lot of my meetings and my working with people, I think.
And you wrote a blog post for Meet Content a little while back talking about how you've applied your experience with improv comedy also to your work. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I also did improv when I was in Japan. We saw an improv troupe, and I decided to join because it seemed, I've always liked improv, and it seemed like the scariest thing I could think of. And it was. But I learned from my improv instructors with that being a good improver is not about being funny, and it's not about having knowing a ton of data and stats so you can have an answer really quickly. It's about listening. And so I saw a lot of connections there with the counseling class I'd taken, because if someone hands you something and said, here, this is a baseball bat, and you say, what's up with that fist you're handling me? Like, you have nothing there. Anything you create with the other person has to be believed by the audience, and you have to trust each other. So a lot of that listening aspect in improv shows up a lot too. If I ask somebody, can you explain, I didn't understand this topic, can you explain that more for me? And they say no. Then it's not that they're trying to be a jerk. It's that I probably hit on something else. I was talking with a colleague who works in IT, and he does work with the campus-wide wireless system. And he said sometimes he'll get called into a higher up's office, and they're mad about the wireless. The wireless just doesn't work, and this is ridiculous, and why is this bad in my office? And I have such a nice office, and why doesn't it have fast Wi-Fi? Rah, rah, rah. And I said, they're probably not actually mad about the Wi-Fi. They're probably mad about the most recent budget meeting they had. And they're probably mad about the fact that some of their faculty members are flying off the handle on Twitter and fighting with people at another school that they're trying to get a good strategic partnership with. They're probably mad about a million things, but the Wi-Fi is just the tangible one. That's the simple, why doesn't the Wi-Fi work? Not, why budget? Like, that's hard. But why Wi-Fi? And then there's some Wi-Fi person you can point to. And I find that with the web a lot too. People will come and they're like, our website's terrible and nothing's working. Well, is it working? How are we measuring that? Like, there's a lot of ways to figure out if it's working. But it turns out they're usually crabby about something else, and the website's an easy target. Maybe the website does need work, but it's usually not.
It probably does.
It almost definitely does. Like, I'm so glad you came to me. Then the bonus part of that is that I can solve a problem for them. Like, maybe they are mad about their budget, and they are mad about their boss, and they are mad about 1,000 other things, so they choose to lash out at the website, but then they get our web team. They're like, oh, something does work. Great, there's people that can help me. So things wind up being positive that way.
I also liked earlier when you were talking about asking faculty members questions and trying to understand their work better. I think, like, by asking questions, you're admitting you don't have all the answers. And I can just imagine if we all admitted that more, we'd probably be able to get along a lot better.
Mm-hmm. And it's tough, but it will also open up a place. I think as hard as it is for me, it's probably many more times harder for someone who has a PhD and whose job and performance and level of knowledge, because we work in a place where a lot of the idea people all have PhDs, I never mention the fact, or I mention it very rarely to faculty, that I only have a bachelor's degree. because I might think about a master's degree at some point, but it would have to be really relevant to my career and something I want. But my field doesn't require that. And to be a professor, you have to have a PhD. And so I often don't mention it because it would, no matter how nice my faculty members are, that then puts me at some kind of ranking. I went to school for 4 years. They went to school for 1 billion years and did theses and research and went through this whole madness of getting a PhD, and then went through the madness of getting an academic job and holding it down and getting through the tenure process. Like, they went through this whole crazy process that I've never done. And we're in a world where that process is very valued and held up, for better or for worse, if this is the process. So by being able to say, I want to ask questions of you, hopefully, and oftentimes it does open up them to see that this relationship and this meeting is going to be about asking questions. And I'll often throw that out there. Pause me if I say something you don't know. Stop me if I get to rolling on this. And I'll say, I'm not saying this because I'm trying to confuse you, but this is the language that I speak in my world. So when we talk about audits and we talk about deliverables, it comes up, but they'll be like, well, what, no, stop, words, no. Or we just talk about a lot of different website strategies, and a lot of the words just aren't a part of their vocabulary. So I just let them know, just like I'm expecting them to break things down for me, I hope they can pause me and say, what does that mean? Please stop. Please stop with your crazy words.
I thought about your improv post this weekend. I went to an improv show, Comedy Sports. Have you ever seen that?
Yes, that's some of the first improv I saw in the Twin Cities. We went to Comedy Sports like all the time.
That was my first time going to Comedy Sports. It was really cool. It was fun.
That's actually where I had, that was my bachelorette party before I got married.
That's
all
awesome.
My girlfriends and I, we all went to the bar and had a lot to drink, but I had a lot of friends from kind of different friends groups that didn't know each other very well. Yeah. So, and then we all, we had some stuff to drink and people made small talk, but then we all went to a comedy show and it was great. And then we all had this kind of common positive experience that we all laughed our faces off, even though folks didn't know each other. So it worked really well.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, we've talked about a lot of stuff, and thinking ahead to New Orleans, and you mentioned before you're sort of been part of the Confab universe for a while now. What's your favorite Confab moment? Do you have one?
Oh my gosh.
It's got to be the sign, right? It's the sign.
Oh yeah. Oh my god.
The Vine video?
Okay. So yes. So it would be like pick each confab, and I could pick a favorite moment like from that confab. But yeah, the first 2 years ago at Confab Central in Minneapolis, I was asked to speak, and I was super freaking out because with Confab's timing, we were leaving on a vacation for Japan, like my first time back since I'd moved home, and we were leaving the day after Confab. So my brain was just go to Asia travel planning. But I'm like, okay, cool, I can totally, yes, we could do Confab 2, and this will be great. And that was the first year they had done a big, sign, and they made this sign of the Confab logo with these lights in it, and people were posing with it, and it was great. And Lisa Maria Martin and I went and were checking out the sign, and I got behind the stage, and I said, oh, look, all of the lights can be operated if you just flick on and off this one power strip. So we're making the lights flip on and off, and I get behind there, stick my head through the O in the Confab sign, and Lisa Maria takes a video of me flipping the sign, going, yeah, Confab, yeah, Confab. And this was when no one was in the big room, and we were like, that's great. I'm like, did we break it? We didn't break it. Okay, run away, run away. We run out of the room, and Eric Westra, Captain Confab, is standing there with this very stern look and said, we came out of that room looking like the most guilty 7-year-olds in the whole world. And he didn't know that we'd just been flicking the sign on and off, so he's just like, and Lisa Maria and I were like, we're in so much trouble! And we just ran away. And Eric was trying to figure out what we'd done that was so bad, but it wasn't anything. We just totally spazzed out about it. So that was pretty great. And that's now my Facebook banner thing, is my head sticking through the big Confab O going, ah!
I like that
Awesome.
moment too.
Oh,
I was
Confab
wondering if it
fun.
was going to Riker pose. With
Oh
Sean.
yeah, that was the first year at Higher Ed. I still have that on my phone because it's a Vine, so it's 6 seconds long of Sean doing the Riker sit. Which viewers, if you have not seen it, just pause this video now and Google Riker sit. Be amazed. From Star Trek: The Next Generation, and it's a combo of both Sean doing the Riker sit, sitting down and going, Wesley, women, and it cuts off. But in the background, you can also see Christina Halverson give the most epic eye roll that's ever been rolled of Sean doing this. She starts off in the back and then walks away while this is going on, of just full body, oh, Sean. And it's amazing.
So that's just some of the hijinks that would await.
That you can expect.
Exactly. There will be many hijinks. Every confab I have been to has some form of hijinks, and Confab Higher Ed New Orleans will be no exception.
That seems like a good note to end on. Except Georgie was going to say something, so maybe.
I was just going to say any closing thoughts or parting words or.
I think
anything to.
The silo idea I'm really excited about because it's an idea that I actually started to work on in about the winter of 2012. And I have notes of it that are for this idea that are that old, and shelved it in form of developing other talks that I wound up giving. But I've been noodling on this for years and years. So I hope that will help. This isn't just some random historical architecture fever dream of me driving to work saying, I need to talk for Confab. Silos on my way to work. Like, it wasn't just inspired by old derelict urban silos. Like, it's an idea that has a little more length.
Well, it's super relevant, and I can't wait to see what you have to say.
I should finish writing it.
Yes, do that.
I got till November.
Do it now! Thank you for sharing some thoughts. Super
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thanks for hanging out.
And thank you, people who are watching this on the internet. You are awesome.
Right, there's people watching.
Hi!
Hello.
So hopefully we'll see you in New Orleans. Go to confabevents.com and click on Confab Higher Ed, and you'll learn all about it. It's swell. We can't wait to see you, /meet you, /hug you, /give you cake. Until then, bye.
Bye.